This is a Geek Leader podcast, and I'm your host, John Rauda. This show is all about helping us grow as leaders, become better technologists, and improve our lives both at work and at home. I hope you enjoy the show and learn a lot. Welcome to a Geek Leader podcast. I'm your host, John Rauda. And if you could, please do me a favor and take a moment and leave a rating and review in whatever podcast player you're listening to this on, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, doesn't matter. I would greatly appreciate it. And that feedback really helps get other listeners to the show. Also, if you're not subscribed, go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And if you feel so inclined, you can go to geekleader.com/tip and donate to the show. Thanks so much. All right, leaders. Today, I'm honored to have Ben Fox on the show. He is a career coach who helps us software engineers break away from work if we want to and help us to find the next meaningful space, whether that's entrepreneurship, whether that's a different position, whether that's growing our career, whatever that is. He helps people that are in our positions. Anyway, with all that being said, Ben, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, John. Great to be here.
If you don't mind, just tell the audience a little about your background, how you got into technology and helping clients, and what was your moment that shifted your career and your perspective on things.
Yeah. So I'm going to take you all the way back to my first job out of college. I was hired as an intern at a charter school here in Brooklyn. I have a lot of teachers in my extended family. I've worked with children, various ages, and thought I need to commit to some path full time. Got that job 2 weeks in. It was a Tuesday, and I had students coming in Thursday and Friday. Had a simple check-in with my principal, and she said to me, "So Ben, we've been hiring for this third grade teacher role because the teacher had to leave for health reasons, and they're pretty good. But after seeing how you work and talking to the third grade team, we decided you're going to be the new third grade social studies teacher. Congratulations!" I couldn't respond, actually, speechless. But my salary more than doubled, and decided to go with it. And to this day, John, that was the hardest thing I've done professionally.
Hmm.
Teaching these 20, 25, 7-year-olds of 4 different classes. It was intense. And needless to say, I got pretty burnt out and left that job end of the school year. My dad, who's an entrepreneur, said, "Ben, why don't you come work with me?" I said, "Oh my God, this is great. Anything other than teaching right now." And I loved seeing how to build a business and what goes into it. Who do you have to talk to? Where do you have to travel? The conferences, all the nitty gritty. But I missed what I got from teaching, which was helping people grow and develop. So back in 2015, I was thinking growth and development, entrepreneur. How do you put these two together? And I thought maybe I'd want to be a therapist or a social worker because I really love helping people think through their feelings and what's going on. Talked to all those folks, said, "Ben, you need to go back to school, get this certification, jump through that hoop." "No, thank you. I'm done. I think I have something to offer now." And the first big turning point came for me. I was talking to this person. She had a therapy practice and a coaching practice. Had never met me before, and she, in the middle of our conversation, stopped me and said, "Ben, sounds like you want to be a coach." Be a coach? What does that mean? What does a life coach do? It sounds kind of like snake oil. Like,
Mhm.
how can you help people think about their future and they'll pay you for that? But it kicked off this journey of finding every coach I could, seeing what they were up to, what did they do. I was hooked and decided I need some training. Found a coach program where I could see it live for a few hours for free. That was in a basement of a hotel room in Lower Manhattan in 2015. Signed up 2 weeks later. 2016 went through that training and started building my business back then as a coach, and I've been coaching ever since.
Awesome. So, what to you? What does it mean to be a career coach and coach someone through the changes that they're going through in their work life balance and all that stuff?
Sure. I think mainly it's about being a good listener. I think a lot of people that I've worked with tell me I can talk about this to friends and family, but like they don't really hear me, or I can't get as deep as I can when I'm talking to you. And giving people this sense of a space where they can show up and really get to the intense things that they're dealing with in a job. I meet a lot of people who are on the verge of quitting, have already quit because of their work environment. And a lot of those folks don't have the type of accountability and support that could help them think through how to do this in a way that's responsible. Um, so that's one of the bigger parts about being a coach and helping people think through what's going on.
So, what do you see most people, are struggling with at work that they need help, talking through and need help with the accountability that you're mentioning? What are some of the common problems, I guess?
Say a lot of people show up to a first call with me saying, "Ben, the content you're putting on LinkedIn, it felt like you were talking to me.
Hmm.
I'm feeling um, really burnt out by my job. I'm exhausted. I'm working way too many hours, and there's so many fires to put out, and having a lot of difficulty dealing with the politics of their company. Uh, they're feeling like they're doing the job of multiple people and still never getting their tasks accomplished."
Yeah, it sounds like burnout's a real, common theme, especially with software engineers, right? Because we go through like I don't know, cycles of really intense project work. And then it seems like, sometimes it dies down, sometimes it speeds up. And then if you're in a growth cycle, like with a startup or something, a lot of times it just piles on and you have this huge backlog that you can't see the end to. What do you usually tell people when they're dealing with burnout to help get past that part?
I'd say it's usually a two-way street. So I just wrote
Hmm.
about this today, actually, that toxicity in a company is not a bug; it's a feature. It's the way things are run. Feeling like you don't have time in your day, you're losing energy. It's because this company is relying on the fact that people are going to work really hard outside of their normal hours on the weekends. And for engineers, a lot of folks do have to show up for certain releases and weekends here and there. But companies that are toxic, they rely on the fact that people are going to keep giving. So a lot of folks are dealing with uh, wanting to keep their job, but also the people pleasing, I'd say, is one of the
Hmm.
biggest things that's really hard because you want to do great, but at the same time, you're feeling like, I don't know if I can do anymore. And that's where a lot of people meet me, where like, I can't keep going in this way. My health is being impacted. I'm not having time with my kids and my partner and feel like I don't know how to change anything here.
Hmm. When people do feel that way, do you think it's like, should the first step be like update your resume, try to look for another job? Should it be just to get the heck out of there? What should be the next step that they do? Is it boundaries at work? Like, well, where does it all? Because there's so many different options that people toss out there.
Yeah, it's a confusing and hard place to be.
Hmm.
Also because you're already feeling this major lack of energy, and now I have to figure out how to leave something like this. Like, how do I even do that?
Right.
Over the course of my 10 years of coaching people, and specifically coaching engineers in the past 7 years, I've heard again and again this idea: you need to have your next thing figured out before you quit.
Hmm.
But tell that to someone who's working 60 hours, is getting not a lot of sleep, and has two kids. Kind of hard to figure out a good next step. And what tends to happen is when people are able to find a new job when they're kind of burnt out, 6 months, 12 months into that new job, they're recreating that same pattern that they were trying to get away from. So, one of the first things I have almost everyone I work with do is this tool I created called What's My Runway?
Hmm.
If you were to get fired right now, how long do you actually have where you'll be okay? And it's simple, but it takes a bunch of time as far as looking through all of your assets. What do you actually have? Your 401k, your retirement savings, your emergency savings, and then what's going out every month. And when people go through that, they get to the facts of their situation. And most of the people I work with, because they've been in engineering for 10 plus years, they've done a great job. They could actually walk away and have multiple years runway where they'll be okay. And the point is to not use all of that, all your assets, but rather to calm your brain down in this moment where you're freaking out about how toxic your job is and how exhausted you are.
So, yeah, if you have this, let's say you fill out the worksheet, you discover that you've got, a 6 month runway, which is, I would say, a minimum that you want to keep, if in my opinion, just because you never know what's going to happen with layoffs and, job market. Like you said, you always want to have that cushion. But let's say you have a 6 month runway and you decide that, it's not worth it for me to stay here. I'm just going to leave and find something else. What do you do during that time period from the time you leave till you find something else? And is it just like, is it constantly checking LinkedIn? Is it updating your resume? Is it going to meetups? Like, what do you advise people to do?
Right. Well, when it's only 6 months, I typically work with that person for a bit before having them quit because that's not a lot of time.
It's not,
And
yeah.
the hardest part of leaving for folks I've worked with is desperation. If you're feeling like I need a new job and that amygdala part of your brain is saying danger, danger, you're not going to be so effective in figuring out a great next step. You're just going to run towards what's the easiest option that's going to fill this need, real need that you have. So typically, I don't advise people really with under 10 months to a year of runway to really quit. And when I say runway, I do mean like all your assets. Because most people think about this, then I put aside these emergency savings and I really don't want to touch it. I'm like, okay, this is an emergency, one. And two, especially as an engineer, you've done a great job in investing, building up your 401k. A lot of people have their house as an asset. Again, I never recommend dipping into those things, but the truth, the fact is that your runway is typically longer if we include those things. And again, it allows your brain to calm down. So when people do say to me, Ben, this is the time I'm going to quit. Help me figure that out. There needs to be a moment, a beat where people take their foot off the gas. If you've been working a job that's gotten you to this point where you're burnt out and you need to leave, it's going to be really hard to kickstart a job search right away. So it's counterintuitive, but the first thing I have people do when they have stepped away is take a step back. And we really want to look at all these different areas of health from sleep, exercise, all these different things and recreate some habits that are going to create a new foundation for this person.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great idea. Because you don't want to like jump right back into the same pattern. And if bad
Right.
sleep, bad health is part of your pattern, then when you get the next job, you're gonna get burned out again. You're gonna go through the same process. You got to
Totally.
change the underlying, self that's behind there. So
Yes.
tell me about like that quitting process, because that's one thing we never really talked about on the show is somebody
Okay.
quitting. And what is that process like? And how do you even? There's employees that I've talked to not too long ago that have never quit a job.
Right.
How do you go about what is the proper way to quit? Uh, because that may be a question that comes up pretty regularly, especially people listening to this that are burned out and realize that, hey, this place is not the place for me.
Right.
How do you go about doing it?
Yeah. I'd say there's no one perfect way to do it, but there's definitely some elements that people should be thinking about. And I'll tell you about one client that I worked with, who was an engineering manager in Colorado, had been a software engineer for 20 plus years and she was hating the politics of her company. more and more was being put on her plate. She had this team of, I think, at least 5 engineers, and over the year prior, had less and less, freedom to help out her team and move them forward in a way that she knew was best. It was kind of one of those moments, and I think a lot of people in this audience will have these moments in their own career where leadership says, "You need to do this now." And any type of pushback, any type of knowledge based on what's happening on the ground is kind of thrown out to the window because you don't have that power in this organization. And you're getting it from the CTO or the VP of engineering, like, hey, this is what needs to happen now. Don't care what you think. So that was happening. Let's say her name's Kelly for anonymous, to keep her anonymous.
Yeah.
She had never quit a job and she had been working, like having jobs since she was 14. So she had never been without a job since she was a teenager. And this idea of leaving was completely foreign to her. And when we started working together, I was really clear that she did not want to be there anymore, that it was becoming pretty toxic. She was talking about moments where she was being short with her kids. She's like, I don't like who I'm being as a parent and as a partner, and I don't really like my work anymore.
Mm.
So, what I helped her think through is the same activity I was talking to you about. What's my runway? How would you do if you got fired, knowing that you're in a two-income household as well, which changes the dynamic? And she was pretty astounded that if she quit then or got fired, she could essentially retire if she cut back on some expenses. She
Mhm.
wouldn't have to work again, which is a profound shift in how you relate to the power dynamics happening. Because our amygdala, the part of our brain that's trying to survive, is sensing extreme danger if you quit or get fired. That the way you feed yourself and feed your family is going to be severely impacted. And it takes this interesting route where people are like, well, then I'm going to end up on the streets and I'll have nothing. Like, wait a second. You just told me that if you quit now, you'll have enough money to survive for the rest of your life. So for her, that changed her relationship to her work. And she started to be more bold. And as a manager, she had some power. So she was speaking up more and creating boundaries where she had none as far as how often she was working. Like, hey, let's close that laptop at the end of your actual workday. And after doing that for a bit, she realized this wasn't the right fit for her. So what I helped her think through is how can we be even more bold and potentially see if you can get severance. So it's a strategy that doesn't always work, but it's happened for a few of my clients where if you're able to offer something like, hey, I know I have X, Y, and Z projects, I'm looking to leave. If I am able to complete that in a shorter time frame, could we discuss a certain amount of severance? So creating a win-win-win situation where you leaving, if you're going to do it anyway, could be helpful to them where the next person's set up for success, which she was able to do and get some severance, which was great. So that's the stuff that happened in terms of dealing with wanting to quit and then actually doing it successfully. And then a big part of it is also making sure your significant other is on board. So we had a bunch of conversations of like, how do we have this conversation? How do I make sure I have all the facts so that my spouse knows that we're going to be okay, and make it appealing to them where, hey, I'll actually spend more time with the kids. I'll be able to take them to school. I'll be able to cook more of the meals. Like I'll take more of the lion's share of stuff at home, and I'll also just be happier. And that's what ended up happening.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. I think that's a perfect scenario. And I've seen similar things where, like, when you mentioned negotiating severance, it's kind of one of those things where I haven't really thought about it, but I have seen it happen once before where, like, I took a job at a director level, and the person that I was replacing was leaving to kind of start his own consultancy. And the way he set it up was, hey, I'm going to not go work for another company. I'm going to start my own thing. So I'm going to be out, but I'll stay here until you hire somebody and bring them on. And I'll spend 2 weeks like bringing them up to speed before I bounce, if you can give me some severance. And they agreed to that. So he helped hire me, brought me in, which is kind of awkward. So, like, I'm replacing you. This is weird, you know. But at the end of the day, it kind of worked out well for everybody.
It's amazing.
eh, but yeah, that's another example of being able to negotiate that kind of and if you don't have anything lined up where you have to, like, here's my 2 weeks notice, I've got to start this other job. You have that flexibility to kind of offer that. And I like what you said about starting boundaries and having the freedom to feel like she could, place boundaries where she didn't before. And I think I have to say I've been blessed, and I've told lots of people this before that, my early on in my career, I was never the breadwinner of our family. My wife always made a little bit more than me, which is great, which meant that I didn't have the fear of, like, I'm going to lose my job today. It meant that I can kind of be a little bit more flexible. And I remember when we had our first kid, maybe it was our second kid. I don't know, when we had one of our kids, and I was just working too many hours, and I went and told my boss. I said, "Look, I know the expectation around here is to kind of work late into the evenings, but I'm going to leave between 5 and 5:30, and I'm going to go home, and I'm not going to check email. I'm not going to check my computer. I want to spend time with my kids, and then around 8:30, when they're in bed, I'll pull back up my laptop and see if there's any emergencies that I can deal with, and I'll deal with them." And he's like, "I don't think that's going to work." I said, "Well, let's just give it a try. If you have to fire me, you have to fire me."
Wow.
And I left that, and I ended up becoming more productive during the day because I kind of knew mentally I have this deadline of 5 o'clock now, and I'm going to get things done. I became a lot more productive during the day. And then, what do you know? There were no huge emergencies that needed me. It never was like this catastrophic thing. And I worked at that company for another 3 or 4 years before moving on to somewhere else. And I was much happier there. I
Yeah.
think, and I was in a new management role, and my employees were happier because I was treating them better, because I wasn't on them to be late either. Kind of just had this trickle down culture change at the company. And I think I became less toxic as a boss too. Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like you've already done this super successfully, and
I think
especially at a time when you're having a kid, right?
Yeah, I kind of fell into it, but because I had that freedom, and like you said, if anybody can have that freedom, if you just go through the exercise of taking this worksheet and seeing what your runway is, then that can give you freedom to start placing boundaries that maybe you should have been placing all along, and maybe that'll change
Right.
where you're at, and you won't need to go somewhere else. Uh,
Exactly.
yeah. So,
And I've had that happen a bunch too. Sorry.
Mhm. Yeah. So tell me a story about that. Like how placing these boundaries helps. Because some people, I don't want to say like they're toxic unintentionally, but there's a lot of bosses that are actually good bosses, and they don't realize they're overstepping because they see you taking it, and
Right.
once you set those boundaries, it changes the whole dynamics.
Yeah, everything changes. And I think a big part of it is, like you experienced, you still get everything done,
Mhm.
but you're teaching people how to interact with you. And it frees up all this energy and time that wasn't actually needed so you can be a better parent, be happier with your life, and do a better job at work. One of my clients, who's actually a lawyer, so although I focus on software engineers,
Mhm.
I've worked with all different types of people. She was a partner at a firm, pretty big public company down in Texas. And when we started working together, she was pretty clear that she was going to leave. She was doing work that really didn't showcase her passions and expertise, kind of this top down moment where the expectations were really high, but it was not what she was going to be best at helping the company with or even feel best about her work.
Mhm.
So, a big part of the beginning of our work together was trying to figure out, like, what else did she care about? If she's going to leave here, like, what about her job, because she was a lawyer for, I think, over 20 years by that point. What other types of companies would you really want to go to? And doing a ton of research about companies in her part of Texas, because she wanted to be in person, at least hybrid, um, and actually starting some informational interviews with people in her network that she had uh, collected over her 20 years. And the more we did that, the more she saw that there wasn't a ton out there that really excited her. Simultaneously, we were starting to have her speak up and get bold, just like you did, and talk to her boss and her skip level. Hey, this isn't actually what I love to do. I can definitely take care of the main projects, but how about this? How about this project that I think would actually drive more revenue and help out some of the more junior lawyers here? And really got the buy in from her, I think it was the general manager of the firm, to show that she's in a misfit type of situation. So as she's exploring other opportunities, which took the pressure off of staying because she knew, hey, if this doesn't work out, I'm building these other inroads and I can leave. She started to shift her relationship to her work, to her bosses, to her time at work and what she was actually doing. And honestly, John, I think a lot of people deal with this people pleasing habit where they feel like they have to do it because that's what they were told, and they don't wanna let people down. They wanna do a good job, and again, that amygdala response of, "I also am scared to get fired because how am I gonna support my family?" So as she was changing her relationship, to work started to get better. And the more she's changed things, the more she liked what she was doing again. And by the time we were coming to a close of our work together, she said, Ben, I don't actually want to leave. This is great. Actually, all the things you helped me figure out are important to me are happening here, and there's no reason to leave.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic, and I like the way you put it that, as she was changing, the work changed, and I think that's one of the things that we don't a lot of people have these unwritten expectations that they put on themselves because they think their bosses expects this of them, and then as they do that, it becomes a true expectation because they started doing this, and it's really hard to get away from that. But if you really go down and have those conversations about expectations and have those conversations about boundaries with your boss and your skip level, as you're saying, then
Right.
you kind of see where they really should be in the company and how to adjust your workflow to kind of fit that. And I think what you're saying is, once you find what you really want to do and what you like to do, a lot of companies want you to do what you like to do because you're better at that. And if you can
Exactly.
communicate that properly, then it's just a straight path.
Yeah, exactly. And as you're starting to change your relationship to your job, I think you did this too in the story you mentioned earlier. The job necessarily won't necessarily be changing a ton, but if you're clear on what the company needs and what you actually want to do, and if you're still producing the results that they're looking for, everything will start to change at that company because you've engaged in this really tough conversation, usually with your boss, about what's not working and why. And I think a lot of this is also about dealing with conflicts and people being kind of conflict averse, especially with someone who has a little bit more power than them. But your boss is just another human who's dealing with a lot of challenges and might not see what you can. So you're actually helping them help you and the company by being upfront and offering some solutions.
Yeah, you got to realize they're just people too, and sometimes managing up is a hard thing to do. But it's better for everybody. Like, as a leader, I like it when my people kind of tell me the things that I need to know that, maybe I can't see from my vantage point, but they can see it clearly from their perspective. Having that extra insight helps me make better decisions, and it helps them make better decisions, and then we can be transparent and share more. And, part of that's just, overcoming the fear because there's that fear of sharing too much with your boss or whatever. How do you advise people to help overcome their fears?
Yeah, that's a good one. I would say you don't have to actually overcome them.
Yep.
A big first step is just acknowledging that you're afraid of certain things.
Mhm.
One of the things I help people do, there's this book that I love that I have almost all my clients read, which is called Taming Your Gremlin. And it's this idea that we all have these voices in our head that are kind of like these gremlins that blow up situations to their most extreme. So, for example, I'm afraid to tell my boss how work is actually going for me. So I'll ask people like, "Hey, what is your gremlin saying about this?" "Oh, well, if I talk to my boss, then he's gonna think I'm not doing a good job. And then what? And then he's gonna put me on a PIP. And then what? And then I'm gonna get fired and be homeless." I'm like, that's a really specific story. Anytime that our brain is creating like this really specific story about here's what's gonna happen, that's where I'm like, whoa, how do you know that? How can that be the only way that it's going to go? How do you know that to be true? And we kind of demystify the extremeness of what the fear is pointing to. And maybe it's just, I'm just kind of nervous to talk to this person because I haven't done that before. Like, okay, let's do some role play. Let's actually, you could be your boss and I could be you, or other way around. And let's talk through this and write it down and then put it on your computer so you know what you're gonna say.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. And, I did something very similar to what you're talking about there is when I first started to teach college at the first class, I met this person that asked me if I wanted to teach computer science 101 class part time. I said, "Oh, yeah, sure, no problem." I was confident, really easy to do it. And like, I think it was 2 days before the class, I started like getting really nervous. And I was reading through a book called The 4 Hour Work Week by Tim Ferriss at the
Oh,
time.
great book.
And in there, he talked about like writing down the worst case scenario of what will happen in your fear and what are ways to mitigate it. So for me at the time teaching, like my worst case was that I would go in there and someone would ask a question I didn't know the answer to. My zipper would be down. It would be just this embarrassing situation. I would say the wrong answer. There would be like a reporter in the class who, while they were taking computer science 101 class, I have no idea, but they would write a story about how incompetent this professor was. My boss would see it. I would get fired from my, you know, 9 to 5 because of this. you know, and the whole thing was like, and then it's like, what's the likelihood of any of that happening? It was like, what are ways to mitigate it? Well, for starters, I could check my pants to make sure my zipper's up before going in there. I could, come up with a plan if somebody does ask me something I don't know. I could stay on topic. I could not take questions. There's lots of ways to mitigate it. And once I thought through, I thought, well, how stupid is this fear? This is like absolutely ridiculous. And that helped me get past it. And I've honestly been teaching ever since. I've been teaching for almost 20 years now. I love it. And
Wow.
I don't see myself ever not teaching. But it's just one of those things where like you do have to play it out. And I love what you're saying to like practice it, practice it. And you can use ChatGPT to practice things too. You can just ask it, hey, pretend like I'm my boss and I'm going to ask you this. What would you say? And have the conversation.
Yeah, exactly. Really smart. And I think that part of us, that fear, so this question of like, how do you overcome your fear? You might not overcome it, but what the fear wants is a stage. Like allow that fear to speak about what's actually going through your head. How deep does it go? Oh, I'm gonna have my zipper down. There's gonna be a reporter in the class. I'm gonna get fired. It's like, okay, great. How do you think about that now? And like you said, it's like, that's silly. That's not gonna happen. Here's how I can mitigate that. And you've been teaching ever since. So sounds like it went well for you.
Yeah, I thought it worked out a lot better than I planned on it working out. But and honestly, the first day of class, I was super nervous, and it was probably the worst class I ever taught. But at the end of the day, I got through it, and I learned from it, and I got better. And that's the whole process of life, right? It's just learning from it and getting better. Um, yeah.
Exactly.
So Ben, what other advice would you have to someone who's dealing with, a stressful environment at work, and let's say they would want to download this runway sheet worksheet, go through it.
Yeah.
Then what should they do? What's the next piece of advice?
Yeah. If you download this, what's my runway tool, which I'll give you the link in a minute here. I will see that. I'll reach out. And if you want to do a deep dive, we can do a 45-minute deep dive for free conversation to see what's going on with your financial picture and just what's going on at work. Um, like I say, although I help people quit responsibly, John, not everyone's going to quit, and that's fine. But what should happen in our work together, or if you work with someone like me, is that you are changing. And when you're changing, your relationship to your work will as well. Um, Another thing that came to mind as you asked that, if if you haven't talked to your significant other about what's going on, you need to. There's no one more important than them other than yourself that you need on board for this type of decision. And one of the things I help people do is, how do you make that conversation a win-win and just include them in your thinking? So I'll do some role play with that sometimes, um, and make sure that they're involved in the decision making because it directly impacts them. And if you have kids, them too. And sometimes I'll even say, "Hey, is your significant other, you've talked to them and they're still really afraid? Bring them on the call. Like, I'd be happy to hear them out and see, like, what's that gremlin saying to them? What's the fear about what's happening?" And typically it's more blown up than the reality.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely correct. Ben, thanks so much for coming on the show and explaining this to us and talking about how to responsibly quit and how to plan that runway and how to plan, set boundaries and all the important things. How can people learn more, connect with you online, and maybe pick up a copy of this runway worksheet?
Yeah, thanks for asking. If you go to benfoxcoaching.kit.com, again, that's benfoxcoaching.kit.com, you can grab the tool for free. Also, you can find me on LinkedIn, Ben Fox, career coach. Uh, yeah, and any questions, please feel free to DM me. It's not super fun to comment on my posts because I am talking about quitting. So if discreet is fine, but would love to hear from you if this is what you're going through.
Awesome. And I'll link that in the show notes too at computer.com so people can go there and click through. Again, Ben, thanks so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. I enjoyed the conversation.
Thanks so much, John.
Hope you enjoyed the show. Please go to geekleader.com to learn more about what this guest is up to, click on their links, and connect with them online. I would also greatly appreciate it if you could leave me a rating and review in Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to the show. And make sure you've subscribed if you haven't already. And if you feel so inclined, you can leave me a tip by going to geekleader.com/tip.